Welcome everyone to the HBO Documentary Film Roundtable. My name is Mike Jackson. I'm so honored to be here. I'm amongst friends here, people I've watched. I watched the these people, and it's just a real honor for me to actually be here having this conversation. So let's start by introducing these folks. From Being Mary Tyler Moore, we have director James Adolphus. And producers Debra Martin Chase and Lena Waithe. From You Were My First Boyfriend, we're joined by director Cecilia Aldarondo. And from Love to Love You, Donna Summer, we have directors Roger Ross Williams and Brooklyn Sudano. Thank you all for being here. I know you got busy schedules. You're so important, running the world. So we appreciate you all taking time to chat with us. I'd love you guys to each, I want to ask you a series of questions. I want each of you to kind of jump in when the time is right. But the first question, basically, how did this project come about? And like, what is the project about? Like, give me a little bio on the project and how it all came together.
Well, I think it really began for me as a young person studying television. It's funny, like people in film school gotta study Scorsese and like, you know, hopefully study Spike Lee too. But for us, we had to study the Dick Van Dyke Show, or Tyler Moore Show. And I think I kind of had to watch those shows reluctantly at first. And particularly with the Tyler Moore Show, the pacing was really slow and I wasn't getting it at first. And then I kept watching. It was sort of like jazz. You gotta really get older to mature to understand it. And when I finally hooked into it, I really understood why the show was so important and why it was so legendary. And then I think that my brain immediately goes, how do you have the same person, Mary Tyler Moore, here in this show as the single career woman, but she obviously made a splash as Dick Van Dyke's wife on the Dick Van Dyke Show. So it's like she shows you how to be a wife and a mother, and then she shows you how to be a career single woman. And so that was fascinating to me. So I read her memoir when I was in high school called After All. I was fascinated by the prologue where she wrote a scene between herself and Mary Richards. And it really just talked about, I was fascinated by her persona versus who she really was. And I sort of kept that, and I kept watching the show and wanting to be make TV as timeless as she did. And then it just sort of, I mentioned it in a Vanity Fair interview, and about wanting to do something about her, and Robert Levine saw that and was like, yeah, let's do it. And then obviously I've been a fan of Debra Martin Chase since the beginning, always seeing her name and credits about things that I really enjoyed and loved. And then she really tapped in and could tell that I was gonna be somebody, and was like, all right, come on, I'll take you under my wing, and was always super helpful. And so when this came along, and I think Debra, I might hit you first before James, but James was super excited about the idea. When I said, what do you think about doing a documentary about Mary Tyler Moore? He's like, I don't know much about her, but I'll do some reading. And he did, and he came back just super passionate about it, and it just sort of all came together. And obviously I was already working with James and Ben on a show called You Ain't Got These, which is a docuseries, so we already had a comfort level, and it just all came together. The four of us, and also Robert Levine as well, who was Mary Tyler Moore's widower, and he gave us all this archival footage, and it just came together really beautifully. So I'm excited for people to see it, because it's a very unique look at the anatomy of a life of someone who I think is the Jackie O of television.
Before I ask Cecilia to answer the same question, let me do a humble brag on my girl Lena. The article in Vanity Fair, I think you were on the cover of Vanity Fair for winning an Emmy, right? Let's not miss that. All right. After I said Emmy, I said it on the cover of Vanity Fair after winning the Emmy. I don't know, James and Debra, if you want to talk about it before I kick it to Cecilia, you guys okay? Or Lena kind of covered it?
Well, it's also one of, I think, the really interesting things about this documentary is that this is the group that's telling the story with Ben, with our fabulous producer partner, Ben. But, and I think, and people are kind of both surprised and intrigued. And it speaks to the universality of what Mary Tyler Moore stands for, that she influenced our lives deeply and everybody else. And I think that she's a complex artist, she's a complex woman, and she was the face of perfection in both shows. And I think understanding what was underneath that is inspiring for all of us, because there is no such thing as perfection. You know, that's celluloid. Real life is sweat and tears and pain and joy and everything else. So I think Jake's done an outstanding job bringing that to the screen.
And Cecilia, same question.
So when I was thinking about this, I think the best way to think about this is maybe talking about the first line of voiceover in the film, which is, imagine you had a nightmare that you had to relive everything you hated about your adolescence. And that's basically what the movie is. It's this immersive hybrid doc in which I'm painstakingly recreating my worst memories of high school, growing up in a very white suburb of Central Florida as, you know, the lonely Puerto Rican girl. And, you know, as you might imagine, it was not the best time. And I reached this point in my life, you know, I was sort of circling around the 20-year reunion mark, and I had enough distance from that time in my life where I had, you know, reinvented myself and lived all over the world and realized that I didn't peak in high school and that I was okay and I loved myself and the blah, blah, blah. And I was like, so why am I still terrified to go home? Why am I still resentful? Why am I still, like, anytime I think about running into that person who called me names or, you know, bullied me or, you know, fake asked me to homecoming, like, you know, no, it's true, it's in the movie, we reenacted it. But, you know, like, why is this so viscerally still with me? And so I don't know, it was like a combination of morbid curiosity and like masochism where I'm like, I need to make a movie about this. I need to like force myself to go home. And so it's a hybrid doc in the sense that I really do go home and on camera, you know, with Verite, we document my 20th high school reunion. We document me sitting down with the boy I was obsessed with for 7 years. Who's now a man, obviously. And it's this, and then we also did these immersive recreations where I'm playing myself as a teenager. Yeah, and it's a journey film. And I say, I go home so you don't have to.
Thank you for going home. Very, very brave thing to do. I'll be way too scared to go back home to high school, so I appreciate your journey. Roger, and then Brooklyn.
So in high school, it started with me in high school. I entered a year-long hustle competition, and I won. Took to "I Feel Love" was the winning song, and so I've always loved Donna Summer. Who doesn't? I mean, she's an icon. She was the biggest star in the world. She was the Beyonce of her time. And she never got the recognition that she deserved, really, as an artist, as a singer. And so when I met Brooklyn and had the opportunity to work on her with this, we really wanted to peel back the layers of who she was and really Donna Summer, the woman, and the complexity of every aspect of her. And it was just a great opportunity because I had the full cooperation of Brooklyn and her family, who really opened up. I mean, opened up in a way they never have before.
No, I would say that, you know, the idea of a documentary popped into my mind because there were so many, I feel like, misconceptions or misunderstandings about really who my mom was as a person and as an artist. And I had just become a mother, and having lost my mom had passed away. It was like a couple of years afterwards, and I was like, you know, like, I feel like I need to do this. And I need to do it in a way that shows who she fully was. And so Roger and I got together, and we completely had the same vision. And it was like, I was like, we can do this together? And he's like, yeah, let's do this together. And I just was, because I was in awe of his work, particularly with, you know, Life Animated, which like gutted me and I loved so deeply. And I was like, he knows how to tell like a family story, an emotional story, a human story. And that's really what I wanted to bring, what we wanted to bring to my mother's life, is not just the persona, not just like the iconography of people think she was, or the queen of disco, but to show how she was, that she really was like an artistic genius and forerunner of her time. And not in a way that is braggadocious, but really at like the foundational levels of what her gifting was and why she was specifically unique to be the person that she was for the time that she was. So, you know, we just got the ball rolling, we started talking to people, and really the main tenet was truthfulness and honesty. I didn't want to sugarcoat anything. I didn't want to and it's really a family story. It's a human story. So they're really, it's universal. My hope is that everybody, along with all the fun music and all the fun stuff of the era, really find connectivity to their own life and to their own family stories.
That's super important. And really quickly, we got to give Roger his flowers too. Image Award winner, Emmy Award winner, Peabody recipient, first Black man to win an Academy Award for directing. We got to give this man his flowers, y'all. Congrats on all of that, man. You're trailblazing. So, storytelling. It's a crazy process that you all have to get into, and the mindset that you have to get into stories. Can you guys talk a little bit about that process that you guys embark on when it comes to telling these stories?
My process always starts with falling in love with the person I'm telling a story about. Even if I don't like the person, I think it's really important to understand who they are. I think by asking a million questions, you can break down a lot of barriers. And the more nuance you can discover in someone and someone's story, the easier it is to love them, the easier it is to understand who they are and how they ended up wherever they landed in life. That's important for me. That's how I tell stories, by asking lots of questions. I'm endlessly curious and very open and not judgmental. I think it's really important when approaching any story to take your personal judgments, place them aside. Because the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, is always the best direction to go in and chase after. It's the safest.
Cecilia?
Well, I think to answer this, I need to acknowledge some folks that are in the room. My co-director, Sarah Enid Hagee, who's in the back, and the film's producer, Ines Hoffman-Donna, is over here. You know, one of the things about, I teach a class on personal filmmaking, and I'm really kind of obsessed with first-person documentaries. And one of the things I tell my students is that, you know, the biggest pitfall to any kind of autobiographical work is being accused of narcissism or navel-gazing. It's like the question of why is my shit important? You know, it's important to me, but why should any of you care? And so I think one of the biggest challenges, apart from it being excruciatingly embarrassing and emotionally hard, was figuring out how to make this resonant, right? And, you know, how to make it really think about how my experience is archetypal. And, you know, one of the things that struck me very early on was realizing, like, I don't know, I didn't think that much about everybody's high school experience. I'm not like, you know, studying, well now I feel like I have like a PhD in high school studies, but like, at the time I was like, I just realized like, oh, I went to this sort of quintessential American high school in the cliche sense of the word. Not everybody goes to that kind of school. I went to that high school where there were lunch tables and there were jocks and dorks and cheerleaders and cliques and bullying and, you know, mean girls and all that stuff. And I was like, oh, this story has some connections to the Hollywood teen movie. And I became really interested in mining those tropes visually and cinematically. And Sarah, when I met her, the reason we ended up working together is because she has this encyclopedic knowledge of, I thought I knew teen movies, and then she came on board and we basically just spent all of our time watching every teen movie of all time, like everything from like, you know, Tori Spelling's But I'm with Death of a Cheerleader from a 1994 TV movie to, you know, Carrie, of course, to, you know, all the canonical stuff, but also some of the deep cuts that people don't necessarily remember. But that became our school, really, like our immersive process. And the other thing I would mention is because it's a hybrid film, you know, one of the things I love about documentaries is the story writes itself in reality, right? Like, to me, the worst documentaries are the ones where people try and predetermine the story. Like, you find the story, you don't write the story. But with fiction, you kind of have to write something, right? So we had to figure out this hybrid process, and we basically, you know, Sarah and I spent hours and hours and hours talking. Like she was sort of my priest. I would tell her all my stories, and then we'd figure out which memories were the most important. And then we sat down and we scripted those scenes before we, you know, started shooting. So for the fiction side, we had, you know, a scripted process, but then we also knew very much that for the emotional journey to resonate for an audience, we had to document behind the scenes. And so we effectively were kind of making two movies at the same time. We were making a doc and a fiction film at the same time. Yeah, so it was a pretty wild process, and I don't know if I could do it all over again because it was a lot, but it was really really meaningful.
So one other question for you, Cecilia. What's your favorite teen high school movie?
I mean, come on, you can't ask me.
Favorite
That's like asking a filmmaker, what's your favorite movie? It's like, we can't do, I mean, there's so many. Like, how much time do you have? Listen, when
Breakfast Club.
They all have, I have opinions about John Hughes, what holds up, what does 16 Candles does not really hold up in certain ways. Sorry, but yeah, there's some problematic things in there. But I mean, Carrie is one that like brought me and Sarah together. Like, literally when we first met, she texted me afterwards her picture of her dog-eared copy, first edition of Carrie. And you know, I identify so deeply with that character. You know, we would talk a lot about like how I was saying this last night in the Q&A. How like when I started making this movie, like that's where I was emotionally. I wanted to burn that shit down, and I wanted that kind of high school reunion where I could get revenge. And I think that, you know, cinematically that film is extraordinary. You know, everything from the way it's shot, acted, and Piper, Laurie. I mean, come on, it's just it's really something special. But yeah, there's so much more I can say.
I appreciate the answer. Roger, Brooklyn?
Well, so for me, the film begins to reveal itself, and the way it started with this is I started watching Donna's home movies. And Donna was an early user of video technology. So in 1978, was it, 79? She bought it, 77, she bought a camera, she started filming everything, and she started acting out these skits in her life. So she'd be backstage, and she would tell her band and put them in a situation, and then they would have to act out a scene, and it would often mirror in her life what she was going through. And I was like, this is incredible. This is it. This film is one giant home movie. And so and I saw this, for the first footage I saw was Donna. Brooklyn was, how old were you? 2 years old. She's by the pool with Donna, and she's like, sing hard. She's like, tell us, she's like, sing hard.
Okay, so we're in the backyard of our home, and she's like, Brooklyn, sing, she works hard for the money. And so my 2-year-old little self is like, she works hard for the money, right? You know, and then, you know, I start singing it, but then she comes later on, we cut to, and it's her, like, totally unfiltered, no makeup, home mom holding my baby sister in her arms, singing, she works hard for the money, full voice in the most amazing way that only she could.
Say, I work hard for my money. I work hard for my money, because she was one of the first artists to take back her masters and own her collection. She's the first artist to sue a record label. She sued Casablanca Records and got her masters. So she was doing it way before anyone else. She was a forerunner in that. She's like, we gotta own our music. She's like, I work so hard, and she wasn't getting paid the money she deserved. She was getting ripped off.
Yeah, I think, you know, in terms of this story, you know, it's like what everybody said here. You know, I think when we first started doing interviews, people would be like, you know, I mean, how honest do you really want me to be? And I said, and when we were talking, we were like, we want you to be honest. This is why I'm doing this. Like, it's not to have some creative reality, it's to really understand, you know? I was like, there's no judgment. Nothing you can say is going to shock me, I promise. And so in the matter of many months and years of talking to people, the story does kind of reveal itself, and you see these through lines come through, and some of them are just undeniable. And you're like, no, we have to talk about this. We have to show this. And there were certain things that popped up within our family that was totally not expected that ended up in the film, because we realized, like, this is real, and this authenticity is really going to hopefully allow other people to have these hard conversations in their own lives, you know? And so it really was the process of doing it informed what the story was.
I want to keep the mic with you, Brooklyn, for the next question, because I'm going to be fascinated about your answer. Yours in particular too, Cecilia. But going into this process, you know, it's a journey. You're uncovering all kinds of information and facts and all these stories. What in each project that you guys learned about the subject that you didn't know going into the process? Cecilia, I can't wait to hear you.
For me, you know, I felt like I had a decent understanding of who my mother was, but I think when I really started talking to people and putting the timeline together and really getting a sense of just how intense, like from 1975 to 1980, she had my sister Mimi, who's here today, as a young mother, catapulted from like she was kind of famous in Europe, but like catapulted into like this worldwide fame for being kind of like this very overtly sexual being, which she was always a class clown. So it was like this persona that she took ownership of because she realized this is my way in. But I think I just have so much more grace for her, like being a mom, a working mom, and understanding like the fact that she survived that, she was able to overcome and still do more and have like the longevity she had and have a successful life, not just a successful career, but a life. Like the depth of gratitude and the awe that I have for her as a human being is like beyond, more than I had before doing the process.
Thank you for that. Anything from you, Roger? Did you learn anything?
I think for someone like Donna, who, you know, she struggled with abuse in the church by her pastor, and that she carried this pain with her, and that pain came through in her music and her voice. The reason that we Elton John, and he says, the reason we connect so deeply with her on the dance floor is because we can feel, especially gay people, we can feel that pain. We can feel that in her voice, in her music, it's in her soul, and that struggle that she had, and it spoke to us. Nothing spoke to you like a Donna song on the dance floor. So learning about that pain and what she went through, and that she carried that pain her whole life and never really got over that pain, that was part of her. That was really, it's hard. It's hard for all of that to go through and talk about. But
yeah. Well, when y'all see this documentary, you'll see what they're talking about. It's just a beautiful film, and her journey throughout this film is just awe-inspiring. It's incredible. Now, Cecilia, what did we learn?
Oh God. Yeah. Well, like I said, I started feeling like Carrie, and I think I hope I put a lot of that to bed by making this film. But, you know, one of the things that I think about is when we first started making this film, I remember we were digging up all this, you know, archival stuff and home movies and photographs, and we were looking at pictures of me as a kid, and Enos, the producer, said to me, "Oh, you were so cute," and it was like a picture of me when I was like 13, looking really sullen, and I would just be like, oh God, no, like, and every time I would see a picture of myself as a teenager, I would just be like, oh, that girl, like it was like an allergy, and there weren't even that many pictures of me because I would hide from cameras, like I didn't want to be seen. I was, and when people did see me, they mocked me, or I never felt like being seen was safe for me. And so then to choose to be in this film and to be on screen, like that was, I didn't know what I was getting into really. I thought it would be fun and funny, and it was, but it was extremely exposing. And, you know, a lot of it was I was bullied for, you know, my weight, and I had a lot of anxiety about, you know, the camera adding 10 pounds or whatever. And there's this moment in the film with my sister Laura, who's back there, who was willing to go weird with me. We painstakingly reenacted a music video by Tori Amos because both of us were really obsessed with her growing up, and she brought us together. So we became our idol, and you know, I knew intellectually what that meant. Like I was deliberately trying to think about what does it mean to identify with white standards of beauty that are completely unattainable. What is the connection between not you know, being allergic to my own image, and then, you know, having these fantasies that are never going to be realizable. And so the whole point was to put myself in a place that was impossible. I'm never going to be Tori. But that was really hard. And that day that we shot it was extremely emotionally intense. And, you know, I mean, there are people in this room that helped me get out there and get those takes in that music video. And, you know, I mean, it sounds corny, but like, I think I look cute. Like,
that shit, girl. Hold that.
and I feel scared about it.
Own it. Own it. Thank you.
I'm sitting thinking because, you know, it's interesting, when you read someone's memoir, you learn about them from their own point of view. You know, so obviously we're very lucky and blessed that Mary wrote a memoir, so we had that. Of course, we wish she did an audio recording of it. It's okay, we don't have that. We got a shit ton of interviews that she did, and so we use her voice a lot. But I think the thing that I kind of learned is just the fact that someone who everybody wanted to emulate was such a ball full of insecurities. That was the thing that really kind of got me. And also, she said this in an interview, that she did not go to her grave. She would not go to her grave as a successful actor, but more as a failed dancer. And that's the thing. She was literally a person that was sort of like, oh, this acting thing is working out, so I'll do that. But she really wanted to be a dancer. That's what she wanted to be. And so I think that's how she was able to take on this character that was Mary Tyler Moore. You know, she was like, oh, I have to be this hero, this beacon for so many of you. That is my job. So I will take that on. And I think that's kind of what I wanted to, that was the secret.
I've gotten to the point in my life where I've realized that it's essential you keep moving forward. And I think that when you look at Mary's life, I didn't know about all the pain, about all the tragedy. I mean, she had a lot from her childhood going forward. But she kept moving forward. And one of the joys of this movie, of telling her story, is that she ended up in a great place. You know, her husband, Dr. Robert Levine, 18 years younger, ladies. The love of her life, the most kind, gentle man. And so it's a lesson, again, for all of us, that you just have to keep moving forward. You got to pick yourself up and just be strong. And who knew? You know, because I kind of was experiencing her in real time, but she was so inspirational to me and my generation. You know, Mary Richards, an independent woman who wasn't married and who had this full life. But she was a very strong woman who deserves to have her legacy appreciated.
Mike is yours.
I think that if you guys are Mary Tyler Moore fans and you haven't read her autobiography, I urge you to. I think that Mary is known as the woman with the eternal smile. And she's an icon. She's an icon we put up on a pedestal. And I think it's really problematic for icons. Don't ask to be put up on pedestals. Don't ask to have to live their life to a standard that none of us can really reach. Mary couldn't either, and I think in her book, when I started to research for this project, I felt that Mary gave me a gift just in the first few chapters of her book, because she started with her vulnerability, she started with her fears, she started with some of the most tragic pain in her life. And I think she revealed that for a reason. I think she spoke about this pain because if you were going to go on this journey with Mary in her autobiography, you had to understand that the person you think that she is not. And she set that up at the very beginning. You're going to be introduced to who Mary Tyler Moore truly is. She reveals herself in the pages of her book. For me, I found that remarkable. I spend a lot of time trying to reveal parts of myself that most men hide very often, and I do my best to put that out there on social media, especially at a time where so many people are taking their lives. I think Mary exposing herself in the pages of her book the way that she does helps me continue to expose myself. I think the more that I do and the more that we do, as difficult as it is, I think it's not just cathartic, it's healing. And it saves lives.
Thank you. I remember watching the doc and you had this image of her, like she's a pioneer, she's a feminist and so strong-willed, what she is. But it was hard for me to reconcile initially, like that insecure person that like really was who she was. You guys did a really beautiful job of like showing her fullness, her whole self. So I can't wait for y'all to see this project. I started this thing here called Why Not Me, where I invite friends who look like me to have conversations with people who look like us and talk about their journey. We actually have a panel tomorrow, 11:30, Convention Center, come through. But, really shameless plug. But I wanted to talk to you guys about that. Like, what advice do you guys have to young people of color, people that feel marginalized, specifically about documentary filmmaking? Like, what advice can you impart that kind of gives them a path forward? I want to start with Lena, because Lena is one of the most inspiring people in our business. Lena's one of the first people to have her hand out to pull you up. And it's not just lip service, it's actual actionable items and things that she does. And I've known this woman for a long time and I've seen her do lots of things. So yeah, I'm putting you on the spot, sis. What's up?
Well, you know, this is my first foray into documentary filmmaking. Yes, we've done some docuseries and we've done that. But I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous about it because of how much I revere and love documentaries. I watch documentaries so much. I learn so much from them. And I think as a storyteller, it's the best way to see a slice of life. You know, I remember seeing something like Hoop Dreams that meant so much to me. Paris is Burning, which gave me my personality. Like, you know, it's just, it really is about how can you see something. And so with this, I was really nervous because a sort of authorized documentary had not been done yet. And so it was the first, and obviously to have the trust of Robert Levine, Dr. Robert Levine, who we all really appreciate. He had me to their estate in Connecticut. I got to see, you know, her desk, her office, all her trophies, all that stuff. So I remember standing there thinking, oh, you know, because I can stand in my own office and look at trophies and look at things, but in those moments I realized this is not the sum of who I am. I don't want people to just come and look at the, you know, the accolades, the accomplishments. I hope somebody will take the time to pull back the layers and get a sense somewhat of who I was as a human being. And that's a very difficult thing to do. Whether you're trying to capture your own story, whether you're trying to tell your mother's story, trying to tell someone's story who I never even met, but who had such a profound impact on me. And I think it was just really important that I do it a little differently. I think if I'm going to step into a space, I want to do it in my own way. And I'm so grateful to James and Ben for like sitting in the screening room with me and let me just say, no, this isn't it. No, this is not right yet. Debra also going back and forth. Me and Debra, like, who's a hero, arguing, debating via text. I'm in London. I'm like, no, this is not what I think it needs to be. I respect you and your legacy. She's like, I respect you as well. But I mean, but that to me is the thing. It's like I always love that, you know, you got to have arguments and debates, and you have to not always get along. But during the process, it's important to come out the way it's supposed to. And the big thing you won't see in our documentary is talking heads. That's just something I didn't necessarily want to see. I was like, how can we just cover it with interviews, archival footage, and just hear people tell stories? Because even reading like a book about Steve Jobs, it was literally just a series of interviews with people who came in contact with him, and they all had very different experiences. And that was something I also picked up too. Was like, I really want every person we talked to that encountered Mary, like, what was your experience? And we found that everybody had a unique story to tell. There were some through lines, but it's also like you're a different person in front of every person you're in front of. So no one can say, oh, I knew this person, I knew this person. We all knew pieces of them. And that's what I wanted to get. I wanted to get as many pieces of her in this documentary as we could. And I think we're able to step away with a documentary that feels different, that feels unique. All these documentaries feel so unique and different because there's been 1 billion documentaries. So how can you sit in front of a documentary and go, oh, that was fresh, that was interesting. And I think I'm grateful that we've all been able to do that with this genre.
What else from Team Mary Tyler Moore?
This is my second documentary. And the first one was the first thing that I ever really hands-on produced. There's something so great about truth, about real life. You can't make it real life is always better than fiction. But it starts with loving your subject. You know, that's we all. But to be able to talk to people, to be able to just turn, and like in Mary's case, her life evolved. She wasn't the same person at the end that she was at the beginning. So that's his definition of a full life. And I think, you know, documentaries, and particularly biography documentaries, teach us about life, teach us about ourselves, and are just extremely tough as hell to make, to be clear, you know, but really extremely valuable.
Cecilia?
So you're asking like advice we might give to
aspiring documentary, docuseries.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I'm gonna talk to aspiring artists of color of all stripes, because I think some of the things that I've, you know, agonized over, they go across media, unfortunately. You know, one of the things I think about as a filmmaker trying to get my films made is just how far we have to go in terms of the level of nuance that is available in terms of media. That you know, we all have a million incredible nuanced ideas, but it's so rare that those projects actually see the light of day. And it can get very dispiriting because it feels like we have this very impoverished media landscape. Like, at this point, we should have exponentially more and better stories about us being made. And it's not for a lack of talent, it's a lack of ingenuity and imagination on the part of the decision makers. But so I'm gonna start with the dispiriting part of it, but for me, like, I guess there's two things I think about. One of them is loyalty and building a team of people, building relationships with peers, not being competitive, territorial, totally egomaniacal, being like, get out of my way. It's like, we need each other. And so the first thing I tell like my students or, you know, other emerging people is like, find your people and stick with each other, because you're gonna help each other get through this and not just make good shit, but also feel less alone. So that building community, I think, is really key. And then the other thing I was gonna say is like, if you get your foot in the door, don't be docile. Like, we are told, like, oh, you should be grateful because you got a seat at the table. You should be grateful that you're there. And I think very often, you know, there's that imposter syndrome that makes us feel like, oh, I'm just lucky to be here. Thank you so much. And it's like, no, we gotta fight to not only get our foot in the door, but build another table with all of our people. And not just say, thank you, sir, for this opportunity. So that's the other thing, is like, figure out how to push in a way that's actually going to move things forward, not burn it down, because then we don't have anything to get done. I mean, you know, we don't want to self-sabotage, you know, we don't want to be, impossible to work with, you know, whatever. But we need to be smart and strategic and, you know, Robin Hood the system. So that's what I would say.
Gotcha.
For me, I would just say start. That was the advice given to me when I was first kind of ruminating. Just like start. Just like take the leap. You know, sometimes you have an idea and you're thinking, it's like, okay, like just take that first step. And then what you just said is building that community. You know, this was my first documentary. I've been an actor for 20 plus years or whatever. But for me, it was Roger was like, took me under his wing, and he was like, trust yourself. You know how to tell a story. And so it's having great mentors and leaning on them and asking questions. I asked probably so many questions, but I was like, you know what? Like, I'm here to learn. Every experience is a learning experience, no matter how long you've been doing it, right? And to stay curious. But, you know, I think that it is like, it really is just like that one foot in front of the other and collaborating, having that community. It's like iron sharpens iron, and trusting yourself, and then also knowing like your voice matters. Like, trust yourself, like what you have is worthwhile. And I think that, you know, you have to pick your battles sometimes. You're like, this is really important to me. And sometimes you have to fight and say, you know what, no, like I have to stand on this. I know this story because this is what I'm bringing to the table. And really standing in that truth and in that power and those conversations. And even if it is your first time, you know? And so, because sometimes that's why you're there. That's why you're doing it. And so that would be my 2 cents.
I don't even know where to begin. So I want to speak to BIPOC filmmakers because for so long, our stories have been told by other people. We didn't get a chance to tell our stories because of the decision makers. So for me, every documentary is personal. Every film I make has me in it. In every film I make, I'm dealing with some truth about myself that I'm exploring. And I think that's important to use your pain and your struggle and put it into your art. You have to be passionate about the films you make. But for what you talked about, which is getting through the door, having a seat at the table, that's the real challenge in our industry. For 6 years, as the governor of the documentary branch of the Academy, and I walked into that room the first time. I was maybe the second black governor after the great Charles Boone Isaacs. And I walked into that room and it's all white men. They're sitting at the table. It's Spielberg and Hanks is the governor of acting and Spielberg. And I was like, I could be, like you said, really intimidated. I was intimidated. And I was like, imposter, I'm an imposter. What am I doing here? How did I get in this room? And I was like, fuck that. I'm gonna kick down this door and change. And I could change my branch. So I could change the doc branch. So what I did was we had A2020 because it was Oscar So White. So we had this A2020 initiative so we could invite whoever we wanted. And our branch I took it from non-gender parity it's the first branch to get complete gender parity in the Academy. 30% I went crazy around the world and invited 30% are international of our branch. So the reason why the films that are getting nominated in documentary are international films is because 30% of the branch is now international. And we brought in women and people. There were like 6 members from Latin America when I started. There were like 5 black people in the branch. Now it's a completely different branch. And some people don't like that because they don't like change because they don't want to give up power. And so they had to give up power, and the doc branch now is the most progressive branch in the Academy that's like forging. So that's what you have to do. You get that door, if there's a crack in the door, kick it open, and don't feel like an imposter. You gotta just open the door for everyone else, and that's my thing. I gotta help all the people who look like me who didn't have the opportunities to get in the door and get to make their films and tell their truths.
We're about to wind it down, so I have a bunch of questions I want to ask. I'm going to create a hybrid question. The first part is, how did you break into the business? And then the follow-up to that question is, what's next? So we're going to see the entry point and then what you've got cooking on the end right now. I think that was clever on my part, but I don't know. We'll start with, you want to start? Let me pick, I'm moderating. Cecilia?
How did I get my start? Well, I made my first film when I was 36. I started making it by stealing cameras from the school I was getting a graduate degree at, and I got my start by chasing down absolutely anybody who might help me, and relentlessly going to things like this and going up to people and going, hi, and and I also studied documentaries, so by the time I made my first film, I really was in love with the genre, and I'd seen a lot of stuff. So, but honestly, nobody gave me permission. I just kept going, and it took a really long time, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, all that kind of stuff. But eventually, I found people on the decision-making side who saw me and saw potential and have really stewarded me and helped me along the way. So that's how I started.
What's next?
And I'm working. I've caught the fiction bug, and I'm starting to write my first fiction feature script. And let's just say it's something that they wouldn't expect a Puerto Rican girl to direct.
It's a period piece, a British period piece. So yeah, take that. We'll see what happens.
It's on all of them.
I know, we did exist. I know, wouldn't you know it? That's kind of what it's about, so yeah.
Just don't let erase it from history. Oops. Sorry. Brooklyn?
Well, you could say I'm in the family business, so to speak, so I was kind of born into storytelling. But professionally, I started as an actor on a sitcom called My Wife and Kids. But with Damon Wayans, who I applaud, he gave me my big break, so very grateful to Damon. You know, so just been doing that. This is my first, first film, the first. It will not be the last. So I'm currently working on that next documentary. So I have an eye on, been in conversation with that next person. So I've loved every aspect of this process. As an actor, you collaborate in one way. You don't always get to have your complete vision, and I think being on the directorial side and the production side of it, to have your vision and to be able to have the power to see it through is something that's really hard to give up. So that's, also acting. I have a Lifetime movie coming out next week, and more film.
Roger? First break, what's next?
First break, okay. I was a journalist. I was working for CNN. I hated working for the mainstream media. I quit my job. I took every penny I had and I went to Zimbabwe. I heard about this girl living with a disability who was this incredible, talented singer. And I made a film about her. HBO, wonderful HBO, picked it up, Shilin Evans, and she said, "This is going to win the Oscar." And I was like, and she was great. And so my first film, that was my first film, and I was like, oh God, this is easy. It wasn't so easy after that, because no one was calling me after that. But my second film was a lot harder to make. So yeah, that's how I got into business. What's next? There's a lot next. I have a hybrid with based on Ibram X. Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist, Stand from the Beginning, that I'm doing with Mara Broccoli Keel. That's going to be on Netflix in the fall, and I'm doing a series with Naomi Campbell and the Supermodels. It's going to be on Apple, and then I have my first scripted feature, Cassandra, comes out in the fall as well. I'm a big busy man in the fall.
So you're got shit going on.
By training, and who always loved film and television. And I got to the point in my life where I took the leap, and here I am many years later. My first job was at Columbia Pictures. They had an executive development program for a couple of years, and I made no money. I got into it, and I was befriended by the chairman of the studio, and he brought me on as his executive assistant. That was my big break. I've gone from there. I have a television series called The Equalizer with Queen Latifah. So we're finishing season 3, about to do season 4. I am doing Broadway now. I had 2 plays on Broadway.
Strange Loop, Top Dog Underdog, massive successes. Right.
So thank you. So I'm going to do more of that, and all the development, so it's all good.
I grew up in this really tumultuous environment and had no aspiration to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be a police officer and went to John Jay College of Criminal Justice for a couple of years. I took an elective because I thought it would be fun to take a film 101, and it wasn't, because I didn't grow up speaking film at all, so it was ruining my GPA. It was driving me crazy. And halfway through the semester, they screened a documentary about cinematography, and a light bulb went off. The very next day, I went down to the School of Visual Arts, I got an application, and I applied to film school. But that's not where the big break would happen. I couldn't afford a private art school, so I left after a year and did night school for a while, and then 9/11 happened, and I was in New York. I'm born and raised in New York, and couldn't find any work whatsoever. So before I gave up, on film and television, I took my friend's advice and went overseas and ended up in the Palestinian territories during the Second Intifada. And I was offered the opportunity to teach doc filmmaking at a university. And that changed my life. When I came home from that, I fell in bed with two prominent New York filmmakers who were doing a number of films with HBO, Mark Benjamin and Mark Levin. And they would take me under their wing for a number of years before gifting me my first TV series, Brick City for Sundance, which went at Peabody. After that,
it's in my notes, I forgot to say it. Peabody, y'all, come on. A lot of black excellence up here, y'all. Respect that.
and what's next? Lena and I, along with Ben and Mariah in the back and Allie, are all working on another project called Gifted in Black for Amazon, where we look at 300 years of black music. We talk about how black folk have been able to reconstitute our culture one piece at a time through multiple genres of music, culminating in hip-hop culture. It's seeded and anchored to 2020, the uprising, in Swizz, Beats, and Timbaland verses.
It's amazing. So Lena, on the second part of this question, don't tell us everything. You got so much shit going on. Just give us a couple highlights, all right? I got one more small question.
Look, man, I want to plug a couple things. No, it's so funny you mentioned Mara Brackett-Gill. I got my big break being an assistant on Girlfriends. What would be their last season because the strike happened, so we didn't get to come back. But it was obviously I didn't get to go to HBCU, but I say working at Girlfriends was like my HBCU experience. So yeah, and then after working for Mara, she got me a gig working as Gina Prince Bythewood's assistant. So I was her assistant on Secret Life of Bees. And last but not least, Gina kicked me over to be a PA on a black woman's first film, which happened to be Ava DuVernay. So I worked on I Will Follow as a PA. So that was like really my break, was working for those three amazing black women and learning from them and going on from there. And what's next, obviously, is Big Brave Town More. Very excited about that in HBO. But we also have another documentary that's screening here called Kokomo City. Directed by the amazing D. Smith. And it's funny because I talked about documentaries such as Paris is Burning, Hoop Dreams, both very black-ass movies directed by white directors. That's fine. We're grateful they documented us. But the great thing is D. Smith is documenting trans black women who happen to be sex workers. But it's really just about their life and their experiences. And I hope we all get a chance to see it when it springs here. So that's going to be hidden soon. Magnolia Pictures picked that up out of Sundance, so we're super excited. We have a movie streaming right now on Disney Plus called Chain Can't Dunk, about a 5'2" Asian kid who wants to learn how to dunk a basketball. Hope you guys check that out. And then March 31st, 1001, will be hitting theaters, A.V. Rockwell's debut film, starring Tiana Taylor. We were really grateful to win the Grand Jury Prize out of Sundance, so we're excited for y'all to see that too. So that's what I got going on.
Hey, what time is it?
I know.
All right. That's what black folks do. We just keep on the side. Shit's popping off. You know what I mean? That's our world. I was going to ask another question, but I think I want to end it on one. I'm going to let Lena close it out. I love putting her on the spot. What are your final thoughts on this experience, being at South by Southwest, working on this film, being on this panel with all these wonderful filmmakers, just the entirety of the experience? Like, I kind of speak, I know you can't speak for everyone, but kind of sum it up as you best can for the group.
I mean, what's so fascinating is that all these documentaries are about women, you know, and about our experiences. If we all identify as women, is that fair? Are we all cool? I'm gonna ask. I mean, you have to be sure about if you identify with the gender you were assigned at birth. And it's about who we really are. You know, there's a face that we put on every day when we go out into the world. And I believe particularly women, we're expected to be soft. We're expected to always be kind. We're expected to always have a kind word. And the truth is, we're trying to make it every day as well. We're trying to figure it out. We don't have it all figured out. And we want the space to be human beings and to be flawed. And I think that's what's so exciting about this. And I just got in yesterday to see Swarm. First I got to see Janine, if you guys aren't familiar with her, she's a phenomenal writer, to see her work. And I think we really are at the forefront of what's happening. And I think it's important to tell our stories, to make sure our legacies are not forgotten, to make sure that the lioness is telling her own story, not the story of the hunter. I think it's really important, and I'm a person that loves documentaries. You guys can tell. I'm honored to have this be our first one together, and I'm excited about seeing these other documentaries. That's the thing. I will watch them anyway, even if we weren't on the panel. I would just tune in because I'm so fascinated by our stories and our humanity, and that's really why I think I'm always drawn to documentaries, because you can't look away from someone's humanity when you see a documentary about their life. And I think that's what's so amazing, and I think to be able to tell our own stories and to be able to do it, that's what's so unique. It's like these stories are so connected. Like we never got a chance to meet our subject, and so we're almost feeling like, shit, I hope that, you know, her spirit somewhere is like, okay, you know, but I think it's yes, we got Robert Levine who's gonna make sure we know, but I think what's exciting about this festival is that, and there's other festivals that we go to that can be kind of sometimes stuffy and sometimes a little like, this one is fun. The energy is like palpable. And I think, and the first time I came to South by, I was a Ready Player One. We showed it here and the energy was phenomenal. And to be here last night to see Swarm, to be going to these screenings, these people are not stuffy at all. You know, these are people who are like excited, they're happy, you're gonna hear from them in the audience. And I think there's no better place to show your movie than here. Because you're gonna get some energy, and you're gonna get a lot of love, and you can't get this kind of energy at any other festival. So I'm excited to be here.
So in closing, I want to just say, hey, you know, I've produced documentaries, features, everything, and it's really hard to get anything made. Even for the people up here, like nothing's guaranteed. You're only as good as your last credit. So I just want you guys to like know, like the struggle is real, but the grind is worth it. And I want to thank all of you guys for sharing your stories and your experiences. It's been an absolute pleasure to moderate this panel. And with that, that's what I'm going to do.
I just want to thank Sarah and Nancy Abraham for having the best taste in the business. Seriously. Sorry. I didn't want to go. Actually, sure.
Roger, Lena, just go.
We concur.
Yeah. Yes. Sarah Rodriguez, Nancy Abraham, Lisa Heller, they continue, what? Tina, they continue to champion filmmakers from all backgrounds and all races.
Can I just say something real quick?
Damn,
I'm so sorry, but I have to join in on this like glow fest because yes, we struggle to make our work, and I just want to say like the level of creativity that they foster is unparalleled in our field. It's getting harder and harder not only to make docs, but like to make original, artist-driven, you know, really innovative work. You know, a lot of decision makers are trying to just make us churn out content, and that's not what they're about, and they really respect their directors and their producers, so I just want to really acknowledge that.